Towson, Houston Texans. We got a full dose of not just turkey and cranberry and gravy and mashed potatoes and all the good stuff and a pumpkin pie that goes along. Sweet potato pie in my house this year with Thanksgiving and all the football. We got to sit and put our feet up on Sunday afternoon and watch the Red Zone channel all day, watch the Steelers sweat it out until the end, and lo and behold, it ended with a thud of disappointment of the Pittsburgh Steelers winning late into the night. But, Luke, I don't know that even matters, right? I don't feel like the Ravens are chasing the Steelers right now, although beating them 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now would be a very nice thing to go along with the schedule this year. But they're not going to win the AFC North. I don't think it matters whether the Steelers won or lost. But, boy, there was a lot of bad football being played across my telly all weekend, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just I feel like we talk about this on a weekly basis,
and we do.
You look at so many of these games, and I mean, not even very many competitive, compelling kind of games. I mean, yeah, you look at some of these games. Oh, okay, the Tennessee-Indy game was close, but was anyone glued to their TV set watching that? You know, was anyone moving off of Red Zone channel to go try to find that game if you had the ticket? I don't know. I mean, Buffalo, Kansas City had some intrigue to it, certainly, especially with Tyrod Taylor coming back, and a big win for the Bills. But you go down the list, and it just, I mean, I was really looking forward to Rams-Saints. And, I mean, the final score, I mean, the Saints scored late to make it a one-possession game, but, I'm watching most of that one. I felt like the Rams were in control most of the way.
Yeah, that was the game that I sort of circled and said, well, that's going to be interesting because these are playoff teams. I mean, maybe we didn't think that in August, right? And maybe we haven't seen Jared Goff play and seen all those empty seats out there where USC plays and all that. And, I've seen the Saints play a couple of times. I'll say this. I mean, if that's the best the league has to offer, no wonder everybody thinks the Eagles are just going to win the Super Bowl because the Eagles were the best team I saw this weekend, not named the Chargers, right?
Well, the Eagles were the best team this weekend, period. I mean, you look at them, they kind of remind you right now, and look, we're just getting past Thanksgiving. A lot can change. One injury to a Carson Wentz or another key player to that team could change things, but right now they kind of remind you of when, over the last 10 to 15 years, when New England's at their best. It's kind of the Eagles and everyone else right now. I mean, that's just what it feels like. They've just been that good.
That feels weird to say, doesn't it?
Oh, no, it really does. I mean, especially, where I live in southern Pennsylvania, you have some Eagles fans that come out of the woodwork and, start talking smack and everything. But
I can't imagine anybody from Philadelphia with a mouth.
I know, right?
Right? Exactly.
But they've looked really, really good. And I guess Sunday, maybe it put a little more context into the fact that we were talking about a Ravens team losing to that Bears team at home earlier this season, and how inexplicable that was. And when you saw the Eagles, I mean, they jumped out to a 24-0 lead at halftime, and they coasted the rest of the way. I mean, they didn't have to do anything else really after that. So, I mean, they look like the class of the NFL right now, and that's not to say things won't change. And I do want to go back to that Rams-Saints game. As much as it didn't live up to, I guess, my expectations, those are two good football teams. I mean, the NFC, there's some definite quality there that the AFC is lacking top to bottom. I'm not saying it's all those teams are juggernauts, but right now you're talking about a 7-4 Seattle team that's on the outside looking in as we head into December. I mean, that's that says something about at least the top half of the quality of that league, and then you get to teams like Green Bay and Dallas, who at one point were formidable, but Green Bay without Aaron Rodgers, we see how that's gone, and Dallas now without Zeke Elliott. I mean, they look terrible without Elliott in the backfield. So the NFC still looks like the superior conference by a pretty distinct margin, and the Eagles are really leading the way. I mean, that's my biggest takeaway. It just, you get the feeling that the Eagles are playing a different game right now than everyone else. But it's one thing to talk about that in late November. It's another thing to talk about that in late January. So we'll see how the next couple months play out for a young team and a young quarterback who's certainly having a great season.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST. Luke, I want to talk about a team that kicked our ass a couple weeks ago up in the glass hole there in Minneapolis. And I know you and I have our plans all set. We'll be broadcasting again. It'll be my 26th Super Bowl broadcast week. We'll be at the Mall of America out there in Minnesota. I don't know if the Vikings are going to be there or not. And I know we're all going to get, whitewashed into the Eagles. We're going to think about the Rams. Obviously, the Saints did not, show themselves to be much over the weekend. And, all these other sort of outlier teams, the Atlanta Falcons and the Seattle Seahawks and the other teams that could make noise. But, I really don't know that I've ever seen anything like this Minnesota Vikings thing. Maybe this side of Kurt Warner, right? Like Case Keenum, and I talked to Coach Billick about this last week. These guys that are second or third quarterbacks, including Tyrod Taylor, right, or any of these people, they're always a punchline until they're not. I remember Chris Chandler being a lifer backup and Warren Moon being a Canadian Football League quarterback. I don't know that there's anything worse than having been a backup, right? Once you're a backup for life, kind of, sort of, right? And in the case of Case Keenum, I don't know that a franchise could go to a third quarterback and have this kind of season. I mean, it really is a tribute to everything they've done up there.
It really is. And, first and foremost, give Case Keenum a lot of credit.
Absolutely.
This is a guy who has been a great story. He was out of the league a few years ago.
He was in a tree. We reported all about that, remember?
Yeah. It's just incredible to think that. He's got a 96.2 passer rating, 14 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Give him a lot of credit because he deserves that. Now, that said, I think you have a case here of, and a lot of this was true with Kurt Warner back in 1999 too. It's not a knock. It's just an explanation of how does this happen. Well, the Minnesota Vikings did work in the offseason to improve their offensive line. That offensive line is much better. We mentioned the injuries. Their running game, even with losing Dalvin Cook, has been functional. They've certainly. They've been able to run the football still, and again, because of that offensive line, they have a nasty defense. So you look at the supporting cast there, and as much as we've talked at length about everything working against Joe Flacco, at least he's had the good defense this year, but certainly all the factors of working against him on the offensive side of things, this is kind of the opposite of that. This is Case Keenum embracing and taking advantage of a really good situation. He's got two really talented wide receivers in Stephon Diggs and Thielen, who's been one of the great stories in the NFL this year, kind of coming out of nowhere to be one of the best, a top 10 receiver when you look at the numbers he's put up. He's got Kyle Rudolph, a really good tight end. Like I said, they've running back. They lost Cook, but they've gotten production there. So you have a team that and a quarterback that. They've just been a perfect fit. He hasn't made mistakes. He's made plays. He's had some big games. He played really well against Detroit on Thanksgiving. He's had some big games, and he's had other games where they haven't asked him to do a ton, where he's kind of just managed the game, kind of like what he did against the Ravens. He didn't put up big numbers in that game, but I think he threw one pick in that game. But overall, just basically the formula was, don't screw it up to the point where we can't win the game with our really strong defense. So, they've been a really
sounds a little similar to the other team in purple we're going to watch on Monday night, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's that's kind of the formula. Except they've gotten more efficiency out of their offense. So where the Ravens are
and we have a $25 million quarterback, and they have Case Keenum.
yeah.
Well, that would be the argument. Yes.
What a world! What a world! But it's just it's amazing. And you mentioned it. When was the last time, as much as we've talked about this dialogue with a home team having a chance to play a Super Bowl in their own venue, I'm trying to think which team has been in such good position this late in the season, and it's hard to think of a team off the top of your head. there have been some other teams that have kind of been hanging around the playoff race, but right now this Vikings team is the number 2 seed in the NFC, and just a game behind the Eagles. So they've been a terrific story. They've beaten some good teams. They haven't necessarily had the easiest schedule in the world, although it hasn't been all that brutal if you look at where it ranks. But they've done a good job. And again, Case Keenum, a terrific story, but really you have to point to everything around him falling into place, allowing a guy like him to have an opportunity to be successful, and then you got to give him credit because he has taken full advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah, the Panthers, we've gone to sleep on them, haven't we? I mean, they're 8-3 all of a sudden. Now that the Saints have fallen back, I watch Cam Newton's antics just to have someone to root against and just to see what hat he'll wear that I'll never wear, in the post games. But that South Division has really turned into something because that's going to be a dogfight the rest of the way. I don't know who's going to win that. I think the Falcons are still the best team out of the three of those.
They could be. I mean, the Falcons, there was a lot of hand-wringing, obviously, with their change in offensive coordinator with Shanahan going out to San Francisco. But it seems like they've found their way a little bit. You mentioned Carolina. I mean, so many questions for them as far as, they trade Kelvin Benjamin and Cam Newton having an uneven season and, stuff with reporters that we've talked about. And that hat, I have to mention the hat he wore Sunday. I mean, what was that?
Dude, he's a clown. He really is. I mean, he's just a clown. And when he loses, he runs from all of this nonsense. He's like a bad professional wrestler, to be honest with you. So, for that, I shall root against him. But, that means that the Falcons or the Saints need to show up, and I haven't seen any consistency there either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's consistency from the standpoint of these are all winning teams. It's just who's going to take advantage and be consistently great. I mean, the Saints had run off 8 straight wins after an 0-2 start. I think you still have to look at them, considering their defense has been much better, considering they've run the football so well. I mean, there's a case where Drew Brees, who's 39 years old, or is going to be 39 years old here shortly, has. He finally has the pieces around him. I still like them, but Carolina, they've quietly, after an uneven start and saw some volatility there, some injuries, they've reeled off 4 wins in a row. So they don't always look pretty doing it, but that was also the case a couple years ago when they were 15-1. I mean, that wasn't as though every single one of those games was a blowout. They knew how to win. They found ways to win. So that's. To me, you look at that, and as much as we all prematurely were anointing the AFC West as the best division in the NFL at the beginning of the season, when Kansas City started off so strong, and you expected Oakland to be there, and you expected, just more consistency out of that entire group, and Denver has completely fallen apart. The NFC South actually looks like that now, where if the season started today, you'd have 3 teams from that division in the playoffs, and 3 teams 7-4 or better. They've been good. It's just a matter of, okay, who's going to be left standing to A, win the division, and B, who is in best position to challenge Philadelphia and Minnesota. And we thought it was the Saints, but hey, they lose at L.A. against the Rams. But the Panthers are still right there, and the Falcons. Despite all of the concern about their offense, seems like they're starting to find their way, and they're sitting at 7-4 and looking better than they were not terribly long ago.
Couple thuds over the weekend. I thought Tennessee should have run Indianapolis out, and they won. Pittsburgh obviously should have played better, but they won. Jacksonville didn't play well, and they lost. The Bills didn't have to play so well. They won, and the Chiefs fell down. Boy, a bad week for the Chiefs, bad week for the Jaguars, right?
Yeah, I don't think the Jaguars game was that shocking. I think probably more shocking that that you see they gave up 27 points. I mean, that's certainly something you don't expect with how good their defense has been. Arguably the best defense in the league, certainly a top 3 or top 4 defense, at least statistically speaking. But they're still the Jaguars. They're still a team that's young. They're still a team that even though they still have a 4-2 record after their loss to the Cardinals. Yeah, you do look at the fact that it was Blaine Gabbert who gave them a better chance to win than what Drew Stanton had been playing before. But that's still a Cardinals team that's been decimated by injuries. That was surprising, but I wouldn't say it was shocking. I wouldn't say that it puts them in really bad shape, other than the fact that they're now tied with Tennessee in the AFC South. But
if you don't feel good about Joe Flacco, go watch Blake Bortles play a couple weeks in a row, right?
Fair. That's why I'm not saying I would put Jacksonville as a Super Bowl favorite, even though their defense, like I said, just like the Ravens, that defense is Super Bowl caliber. But you got to have some balance. So They do have the running game, but Leonard Fournette didn't do much. In fact, didn't do much of anything, 25 yards on 12 carries. So kind of just speaks to how difficult it is for the Jaguars when they don't have their running game going because, yeah, you do put the ball in Blake Bortles' hands. But to me, you look at that Kansas City game, and, I mean, the Chiefs, I mean, you're talking about a team that they were facing a Buffalo team that had the debacle with Peterman and Tyrod Taylor being benched and Peterman throwing 5 interceptions against the Chargers in the first half last week, and the run defense had been completely gashed. And the Chiefs managed 10 points at home? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's a terrible loss for them. And now, I mean, you look at the fact that the Chargers are now just a game back, and I think forget about the schedule and other contenders and all that. I mean, this is a Chiefs team that was 5-0, and they're now 6-5. I mean, what's under the tank there? You know, what's going on there? I mean, you have people that are calling for the rookie quarterback to replace Alex Smith. I'm not saying I would necessarily do that, but they've completely stalled, and that offense.
Everything about them's trending the wrong way, right?
Yeah,
like, literally,
I mean, that offense,
especially the way the Chargers played on Thursday too, right?
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, forget about everything else. I mean, you just look at a team that's lost 5 of 6 and has looked as mediocre the way they have been. Not all those games have been against bad teams. I mean, they lost to Pittsburgh. They lost at Oakland. I don't think those are embarrassing losses. But you look at the fact that you lost to the Giants 12-9. I mean, are you serious? The Giants? And then you come home after that performance and you manage 10 points against the Bills team that hasn't stopped anyone in the run game, and you can't get Kareem Hunt going. I mean, that's alarming. I mean, that's a team right now that I think there's still time for them to recover, but boy, they better wake up quickly or they're going to find themselves on the outside looking in. And when you start 5-0 and then you're on the outside looking in, and look, Andy Reid's built up a lot of equity there as far as what he's done in Kansas City and has had a really good coaching career, but you go 5-0 and then you miss the playoffs and collapse in the fashion they had, you know, that's the kind of run that gets a coach fired. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. You know, I assume they're going to stick with Alex Smith, but yeah, boy, all that talk about him being MVP and the Chiefs being the best team in the NFL that we were hearing less than 2 months ago, that feels like a really, really, really long time ago now.
Well, beware the Philadelphia Eagles because they're this week's flavor of the month in the power rankings as well. Luke will be at the Ravens game on Monday night. I will be a shotgun. We will be in the locker room, and certainly the short week as we get ready for the Detroit Lions this week. You can find Luke, Baltimore Luke on Twitter, Luke at WNST.net. Of course, if there's any breaking news at all out of Owings Mills or from the Orioles or from the Terps or anywhere that is big news, you'll get that first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Kolatzos will be here on Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready for the Detroit Lions. It is the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And, of course, anything you miss here this week, you can find in our buyatoyota.com audio vault. That's there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.